So in general, my mentality, even before X or even before Strive, was typically even if you're a character who has a very strong air game, like a good example is like me. The perspective I had is that if you're airborne, then typically the person underneath you has a direct advantage. And the reason with that is because of how air throw is created. So like even let's say if like me did this, right? This could always happen to you. And the reason is, you can kind of see it there. You can see like she kind of got vacuumed in the air throw, right? Basically how air throws work is you have a hurt box underneath you that's only throwable. It's just a throw hurt box basically. And as a result, like, you could always try to air throw people. And like, no matter what. And I mean, it was like one frame. So typically if they did something that where they like fell on you like this, you could air throw them pretty easily. And that's why if you watch like really good gear pairs take air throws, they wait not like as they're rising, but until they start falling, right? You can kind of see like even my timing here, like, I'm not even doing this intentionally, it's just like habit. But that's how it's so consistent to air throw someone, right? Basically, using that hurt box means that you can always air throw people, always, right? And in Exert is way more prominent, but in this game obviously it's a bit different. But of course, general situations are a lot different too. So before you could always air throw someone and it was like very advantageous, right? But now you can always XP. Like for example, Soul had he had anti-air you 3 different ways. He either had to 5k you, 6p you, or air throw you. And each option lost to a specific type of option. And, you know, like, let's say 5k would win here because it's fast, but 6p would lose because they're too high up in the air. Sometimes 6p would hit because their core box extended into it, and you needed the invul. And then, of course, there's some situations where neither would work because their hurt box was too high up and like essentially like 5k wouldn't hit them, so you'd have to air throw them. So how they changed this, of course, is they made it so you can just always anti-air pretty much. Right? And this doesn't just like, you know, matter for Soul, but it's important to understand like no matter what, typically the game, in my opinion, in my perspective, is always based around having a strong anti-air game, even if it's not direct, right? So I'll explain a bit how I think about playing grounded. You may notice a lot of the time I don't actually, like, I don't do this a lot, right? I don't do a lot of, like, IAB, like, you know, IAB buttons, like, especially not in neutral, right? Like, some matchups you have to, but it's not common. I typically play very grounded, right? And the reason for that is because my perspective is when you play Airborne, like let's say you do this, right? Let's say you just do IID button. As soon as you commit to this option, it's like basically out of your hands, right? What you're betting on is you're betting on the player won't either have the reactions or maybe they're focusing on something else that they won't anti-air you. Right? How I view it is essentially like you give up all rain in the situation, and you're committing to something that either works or it doesn't, right? Either you're at a point where like you just force something, right? If you ever hear me say like just forcing interactions or forcing RPS, this is kind of what I mean. And this is inherently weaker if you play against someone very reaction focused or like patient, right? Like, because of course if you just go ham, like, you know, if you may just run into it, like, you know, like this or something, I can't even do it. You may just run into it, right? But if you just play against someone who's holding their ground or something, this sort of thing is really bad, right? Basically though, the most important thing about it is you understand, like, this is like, especially in this game, it's a very, I think it's an okay option, or like even like doing a jump in button. But like, there's a lot of ways people can cover it too. So it's like, when you do it, I think of it as you betting on the fact that you're betting that your opponent won't be able to react to you or interact with you correctly. Which to me, again, like, if you were here for my talk on matchup strategy yesterday, then you know that I value consistency a lot. So that means like, typically, this sort of thing is what I want my opponent to do, because I don't really need to do anything. They're just like, they're committing to something for me, right? And that's like a good example of IAD, or like, you know, just like following with a button or something. But there are ways you can still use air movement to, like, you know, threaten things. Like a good example is if you do like neutral jumps. Like neutral jumps, like this doesn't put you at any risk or anything. Or like, you may notice, like, especially against Axel, I do this a lot. Like I'll do like jump forward, just like a regular jump forward, and that's it. And it's because of me representing this, there's a lot of options from it, right? Like, what can Solo do from this position? He can double jump, he can air dash back, he can air dash forward, he can follow the button, he can delay, you know, use a dive kick. He has a lot of options to represent here. So even though I'm airborne, I'm not really committing to anything. I'm using the threat of what I can do more than anything else. With something like IAD, you can see it cuts out all the other options. It's just if I react or if I don't react, right? So I think understanding that is a big part of understanding, like, you know, how do I tighten up my game plan? Because if you play against a good player and this is your habit, then they're probably just going to answer you every time, right? Right? So it's important to, like, understand exactly what you're committing to and what the risks of it are. And again, like, even if you don't, like, get killed off this, because, like, a lot of characters really value a hard knockdown, this could literally lose you the game. Just one wrong guess with IAD, right? Like, because all it takes is, you know, like, some shit like this. If you're about to break the wall, it's super, I mean, you just die, right? So, like, you have to view it more along the lines of, you have to be confident to what you're committing towards. And of course, there are some characters that they can whiff buttons on the ground and still anti-air you, even if you're, like, reacting to it, right? Like, see, like, even there, like, look at this. So, like, I'm not a fan of relying on, like, air movement because of that. And the other benefit is you just have way more options on the ground, right? You have way more ability to threaten things, like, you can move back, you can move forward. Your normals are not as easy to interact with. Obviously, if you follow the button like this, I mean, it's just, it's 6P or not, right? And even if, like, you do something like this, I'm trying to, okay, let's say, like, you try to bait stuff, it's not hard to just whiff it once and then do it again. So you can see why I have that opinion, right? Why I think, oh, playing grounded is typically much more superior, because most of the time, these situations that come up tend to favor whoever's on the ground, right? Even if it's not in terms of direct damage, the stability of it is very, very valuable against anyone, right? And, like, of course, you can use movement, but the benefit of it is the threat of it more than anything else. If you show your hand and, like, you know, like, oh, I'm just gonna do this all the time, then you really limit yourself, right? But, like, even if you do something like this and you don't commit to a button, this can also be pretty bad just because of the risk gain, but, you know, like, stuff like this enables other options at least. So typically, like, you can see when I talk about for stability, right? Using the threat of something is usually more advantageous than actually using the option once you're represented enough. And of course, this assumes that there are players that are good enough to adapt to what you're doing too, you know? But, like, that's why, that's why you see me do a lot of hop forward, or, like, you'll see me do, like, you know, FD break, like this. Like, if you see me like this over and over again, it's because I'm trying to get them to Twitch react, right? To me doing anything, because, you know, oh, maybe they think, like, oh, right? So like that's kind of the idea. The representing options like that is extremely important. But again, if you leave it to just iodine, there's no threat. It's just react or not. So that's why if you're like a weaker player and you're struggling with improvement, typically removing IAB can be hard, but it'll help you in the long run. Usually if you're gonna commit to an IAD, it should be a conscious decision instead of a habit. And I mean, most things should be like that too. But it's very important to understand that, right? What about IADFP just to see if they with a button and then commit? Well, I mean, either way, like, what if they just don't, right? Because they don't also need to do anything. You want to be very careful with how you commit to options like this. Because again, the main issue with this is not really like, you know, you can make a mind game out of it. It's just very bad, right? It's extremely bad. But the point of it is like, you're essentially giving up a lot of control in the situation, right? Because like, again, it's either if they react or they don't. Once you IAD and commit to this sort of button, like that's really the end of it. Because even if you just do this, oh, I did it. I did do the pass ball. Even if you do this, it doesn't really. You just lost meter basically, right? And it's like even worse if you do it against something like 5K, where you can just do this. Because again, first of all, look at she's set to mash on block, right? TP. Okay. So sometimes this can even fuck you. And that's because of how if you fall while you're in block stun, it applies 19 frames of block stun when you land, which is what enables this to work. Amelia is a bit of an exception because she has so many ways she can threaten options, right? Like she can do like what's it called? Like fast fall? I don't remember what it's called in this game. Fast fall, and like she's got the rose or whatever. So like she's a bit different, and she has like, you know, a bit more jumps. Typically characters with more movement can threaten more, but like it's not really the best option.